Methylene blue tends to split people into two separate camps, not because of what it does, but because of how it's being interpreted. Some people describe a very clear shift, more energy, sharper thinking. Others take the same thing, the same dosage, and feel nothing, something inconsistent even. That contrast is usually treated like a mystery, but it isn't. Most of the conversation stays on the surface: what it does, how to take it, whether or not it works. But that question is already off, because the effect that you feel from a supplement like methylene blue isn't coming from the compound alone. It's coming from the system that it's entering. I'm Dr. Kenny, an IFM certified functional medicine practitioner, and I tend to look at things when it comes to healing through patterns and systems rather than hype, fear, or black and white thinking. When you step back and look at something like methylene blue through this lens, a pattern starts to emerge that you can navigate yourself. What I've found in this conversation is the people who feel a strong effect and the people who feel nothing are often not dealing with the same underlying system state. The difference isn't the compound, it's the individual. It's the context and environment that it's entering. So instead of thinking with the compound, we need to start with the environment it's walking into. Most people approach supplements with a simple expectation. Take this, feel that. More energy, better focus, clearer thinking, and this applies to other supplements as well. That assumption feels reasonable, especially in our conventional paradigm, but it's rarely how the body works. Our physiology does not operate like a light switch. It behaves more like a network where different systems are constantly influencing one another. So when something like methylene blue enters the picture, it's not just triggering a single effect. It's interacting with whatever environment is already there, and even as deep as the cellular level. And that's where the outcomes begin to diverge depending on the person. If your internal environment is more stable and responsive and has resources readily available, you might notice a clear shift. The system can translate the input, like methylene blue, into something that you can also perceive. If your system, however, is already strained or compensating, you might feel less, or at best something inconsistent. Not because nothing is happening necessarily, but because the system isn't responding as cleanly to that input. This is why two people can take the same compound and walk away with completely different experiences. The variation is not random. It is the variation of the human experience. It reflects the different underlying states. And if your response is confusing, this is usually where that confusion lives. Let's talk about why the hype exists as well. There's a reason that methylene blue keeps coming up in conversations around energy and brain function and performance. At a basic level, it's been studied for how it interacts with mitochondrial activity, specifically the processes that your cells use to generate energy. Mitochondria produce ATP. And essentially, this is the usable fuel that powers everything from our physical movement to our mental and emotional clarity. Methylene blue appears to influence how electrons move through that system. It's very detailed chemistry here, but the more efficiently those electrons can move through the system, the more efficiently energy can be produced. And this isn't just theoretical. In human research, low doses of methylene blue have been shown to increase activity in certain brain regions during memory tasks. That tells us something important, that there is a real measurable effect under specific conditions. And if you are one who likes the research, I've included a free research summary in the pinned comment in the description below. It includes a few of the research articles that I used to create this particular video, if you'd like to dive into them yourself. But this is where people usually start to draw oversimplified conclusions when we start to see research headlines. A measurable effect in a population in an incredibly controlled study does not automatically translate into a universal benefit for everyone. It means that the compound has the ability to influence a system that's already in motion. If that system isn't limited in the way the compound is designed to influence the system, the result will likely work well. If your system does not have the limitation of that electron transport in the way that the compound is designed to influence it, the result may be more minimal or very difficult to perceive. When people think about energy, they tend to focus on output alone. How do I produce more? How do I feel more energized? And that framing assumes that energy itself is something that you can simply increase indefinitely. And that's not the case. Energy production is regulated by many different mechanisms throughout the body. And one of those key regulators is oxidative stress. Oxidative stress is essentially the browning of an apple that occurs in our own bodies when we're simply exposed to oxygen. The difference between us and that browning apple is that we have living systems, antioxidant systems, designed to combat this real time. So oxidative stress and the cumulative load there refers to the balance between molecules that create cellular stress and those that neutralize it. Oxidative stress itself is not inherently bad. In fact, those signals in the right amount are important to drive forward resilience and adaptation. But like most things in physiology, it also depends on that balance. This is where methylene blue becomes more specific in its role as well. It interacts with what's called the redox environment. You may recall this from high school or maybe college chemistry. This is basically how your body manages oxidation and reduction. Or in practical terms, this is how your body handles this oxidative stress at the cellular level. If that environment or system is relatively balanced, you might experience a smoother, more efficient energy response throughout life. But if it's already strained or depleted, changing energy flow doesn't necessarily feel like a boost. Sometimes it feels like nothing at all, or like a response that doesn't hold. In human studies, when researchers improved redox balance and glutathione levels, which is a primary antioxidant, in adults, they observed improvements in mitochondrial function and physical strength and cognition. The oxidative environment, when we talk about methylene blue, is not a side detail. It's one of the factors that determines whether or not the system can respond in the first place. Once you understand the context of oxidative stress being part of the equation, a pattern starts to emerge and come more into focus, and the different reactions that people have to methylene blue aren't random. They tend to fall in a few distinct categories. There are people who take it and feel a clear, noticeable shift right away. Energy feels smoother, thinking feels sharper, their recovery's better, their sleep may be better. In those cases, the mechanism of the compound is aligning with a real bottleneck in their system. This constraint in energy production was reduced, and the system could respond accordingly. Then there are the people who feel very little. No meaningful change, no clear signal, and that usually suggests that the process methylene blue is influencing isn't the primary limitation for that person. The compound is active, but it's not addressing what's actually limiting energy output. And then there's the third group, people who feel something at first, but it doesn't hold or it feels incomplete. This is a temporary shift, and that doesn't translate into sustained improvement. That pattern usually points to a deeper constraint as well, like the last one that can't be resolved by improving efficiency alone. What this highlights is something that's commonly misinterpreted today. Resilience and healthy aging aren't driven by a single lever, like energy production alone. They are the result of multiple systems working together at the exact same time. There's another important distinction that rarely gets talked about in these conversations around methylene blue, and that is the difference between efficiency and capacity. Efficiency is how well your system uses what it has access to. Capacity is how much your system has to work with. In the context of mitochondria, that means not just how well they are functioning, but how many you have and how robust their populations are. This matters because improving efficiency in a system that's already depleted only gets you so far. You can make the gears turn more smoothly, but if there aren't enough gears present in the first place, the overall output is still limited. Something can feel better without actually being better. Human research consistently shows that building stronger mitochondrial systems depends on broader inputs, movement, accurate recovery, and adaptation to stressors over time. It's not typically the result of a single compound like methylene blue acting in isolation. So even if something like methylene blue helps the system run more efficiently, it doesn't necessarily mean that your system has the depth to sustain that improvement. At this point, you can see why this conversation is more layered than it first appears. We've already talked about oxidative stress and mitochondrial capacity, and even those two alone can completely change how an individual person responds to this supplement. For many people, that explains their experience not matching their expectations. But of course, they are not the only variables. There's also the nervous system, quite broadly. Whether your body is more stressed or activated or more regulated or adaptable influences how energy is used and perceived. Two people with the same output on paper may experience it very differently depending on how their systems interpret their signals. There's gut health, which plays a role in inflammation and nutrient absorption and the signaling pathways that influence energy metabolism as well. If that layer is disrupted, the downstream effect is often misread as an energy problem. And then there's the question of how something is used over time, which brings in the dosing and cycling question. A response that looks inconsistent is often a system responding differently over time, not randomly, because we are very adaptable and ever-changing beings. These aren't small details to overlook. When we really put all this together and take a big step back, you stop seeing methylene blue as this primary driver of a singular outcome and start seeing it more as something that interacts with our systems and can actually reveal the state of systems that it's interacting with. That shift is subtle, but it changes how you interpret your experience, possibly across other supplements as well. Because the issue for many of us is that we are complex, but that complexity also must be honored. It's not that nothing's working that you're trying, but that multiple systems are slightly off at the same time, and each one is quietly shaping how energy is produced or used or perceived, or other symptoms that arise. That pattern often gets misread as a single problem, isolated, when it's actually the interaction of these several smaller constraints. That's where this conversation around methylene blue naturally expands beyond any single compound. It moves into how mitochondria interact with our health very broadly, from the immune system to energy output to overall resilience. This video over here walks you through mitochondrial dysfunction, how it develops across multiple layers and multiple systems, and why it often shows up long before anything shows up on your normal labs. I'm Dr. Kenny, Root Cause Health Detective. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.